Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. Members of our team served lengthy terms in prison and we came back successfully. We create podcasts to show how strategies in prison can lead to success. Visit us at prisonprofessors.com to learn more. Welcome to Prison Professors. We are back again with episode number 3 of the inspiring story of Damon West. Now, if you didn't hear the previous episodes, please tune back in to episode number 1, which appeared 2 days ago, episode number 2, which was on yesterday. Today, we are going to be hearing about how his adjustment through a 65-year prison term resulted in him getting out of prison early and about the success he has built since coming back to society. So Damon, welcome back to our program. Please give us a little bit of an update on how it is that you got out of prison.
Mike, it's like what we talked about earlier in the last segment. You and I talked about privately. You've got to make those changes while you're in prison if you want to have something different happen to you in life. So, during that time, doing that 65 years, Mike, I have no idea when they're ever going to let me out. I know that I'm eligible for parole in 6 years, basically, because with good time and work time credit, if I obey all their rules, if I do everything I'm supposed to do, and if I work my job, I'm going to get credits that are going to help me towards parole. In Texas, they don't pay inmates. You don't get paid with any kind of hourly wage. You get paid in good time credits and work time credits if you have a non-aggravated case. And this is a whole separate issue in Texas because aggravated offenders they're not eligible for good time and work time, but you have to make the most of your time. And so going along with the theory of looking at prison as an opportunity and not a punishment, I did the most that I could while I was in there. I got involved in every class I could in that chapel. I got involved with correspondence classes that I could take in there, Bible study classes, whatever I could do to occupy my time and keep myself tapped into the real world. And one of the best things that I had going for me that I realized that not everybody has is I had a ton of family support, a ton of community support because I was locked up in a prison that's 10 minutes away from where I grew up. My parents, who never gave up on me, they came to see me over 150 times when I was in prison, Mike. 150 visits from the same two people. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's not something I saw a whole lot of in there. Somebody getting that many visits. And whenever I wasn't getting visits from them, there were friends and cousins and other relatives that would take their weekends out to come see me. And that helped me stay connected into the free world out there, as we call it, the free world. I always felt like I had one foot in, one foot out of prison. And I know I was very blessed. And so it was 2015, and my time for parole was up. It was up for my first review. And I'm looking around me, and I see that nobody ever makes their first parole on a life sentence. It just doesn't happen. So I don't have any grand expectations that it'll happen to me. And besides that, Mike, I've got to go with the theory that that's not something that's on my line. I have to remind myself every day, many times a day, Damon, that's not on your line. And that's going along with what I learned in recovery. There's 4 things that are on my line, what I think, say, feel, and do. So I have to remind myself all the time that parole's not on my line, and I've got to keep on moving and keep on doing my thing and bettering myself. And more than that, Mike, I mean, we're all in there because we've got the one thing in common that we've all made victims along the way, and we're all there to pay a price. Prison by design is very difficult. It's not meant to be something great and easy, but you have to find ways while you're in there to make the most of it. So when I go to see parole, I sit across from the parole officer reviewing me for my first parole, and she's going through what's called a parole packet. I don't know if they had anything similar in the federal system, but in Texas they have what you can present a parole packet. And the parole packet is a compilation of all the letters of support that you have, all the certificates you've accumulated while you're in prison, your background, your bio, your resume, your plans for when you get out, your 6-month plan, 2-year plan, 5-year plan, a letter that you write yourself to the parole board. So I've worked with my mother and put together a really, really solid parole packet, we feel. And when she's going over it with me, and she keeps going back to the fact, she's like, you have been so involved with everything you could while you were in prison. She's like, you've tutored other inmates, you've done everything you could. And she stopped and she closed my file and she said, Mr. West, why do you do all these things? You're in prison. Why are you doing all these things? And because I told her that if I could pick one word of something I want to be in life, it's useful. I said, I have spent so much time being useless. And I told her about the remorse that I had for the crimes that I committed. And parole, I think, can see if you're genuine about that, if you genuinely have remorse, and they want you to feel that. And I told her I did. You know, I made a lot of mistakes and I hurt a lot of people along the way, but I have so much potential and so much to offer. When they're ready to let me go, I asked parole to send me to the one parole option they have. It's a drug treatment parole option, and it's where you go and spend 6 months in a drug treatment prison, and then you have an aftercare component when you get out of prison for 18 months. And she's told me, she's like, you know, Mr. West, that's one of the hardest parole programs there is to complete, and most people go back to prison. And I said, well, I'm not most people. You know, give me a chance whenever you decide to let me go. I'd be very grateful. And so we ended the parole meeting. It was a very good meeting. And I went back to my cell, went back to my pod, and I put it out of my head as much as you can put out of your head that parole visit, you know, because no one can really put that out of their head. They sit there and lay in their bunk at night, and you think about, man, what if they let me go? What if they let me go? And on a Friday morning, it was Friday, May the 1st, 2015, I was working at the chapel as a clerk. I was a clerk for most of my jobs. I was blessed to have a really good job, which in Texas is good because Texas doesn't have air conditioning in their prisons. And so the clerk jobs usually had inside of a building where there's air conditioning. So I always went back for lunch and called my parents on Friday to see what was going on and see what they were doing for the weekend. And my mom said, baby, we need to talk. And I was like, what's wrong? You know, I thought immediately you go to something bad when you hear that in prison. And she said, well, I just checked the parole website. And she said, baby, they've made a decision on your parole. And Mike, my stomach dropped, man. And immediately I started telling my mom, I'm so sorry. We'll do better next year. You know, I promise next year will be different. I'm making promises I can't keep, right? And she said, no, baby, I don't think you understand. She said, boy, I still get emotional talking about it. She said, baby, they said yes. They granted your parole option. You're going to go to that treatment center. And she said, baby, the nightmare is over. You're coming home. And I remember, Mike, I told my mom I was in tears in that day room, which, you know, that's not the best place to go crying, and people watch everything. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, don't lie to me. Don't play with me. And she said, baby, I would never do something like that. She said, you're coming home. And so Mike, they let me go. They sent me to the drug treatment center, and I made the most of it while I was there. I mean, it is basically a treatment center where they try to detox you from prison. You know, they take a lot of prison rules off the table. You can't fight while you're there. You're expected to, you know, anytime you see someone stepping out of line, you're expected to correct them and stuff like that. Things you do in society. I mean, to be a normal, productive member of society, you can't beat your way out of problems. You see a problem, you report it, kind of thing. They wanted to get you more in line with that, more of a behavioral modification program than anything. And that whole time when I was in prison, leading up to that 6-month treatment center, I had a plan, Mike, and my plan was that when I got out, I wanted to go share my story with as many people as possible because I wanted to give the best gift that I thought I could give back to society for all the mistakes I'd made, is that I would share my story with others so that hopefully I could stop someone from having to make the same mistakes I made in life. Because rarely is it ever a good idea to make your own mistakes when there's so many examples from others of what not to do. And I decided when I was in prison that I was going to be that example of what not to do, but not just that example of what not to do, but an example of hope, you know, hope of perseverance of the human spirit to overcome the greatest challenges. I mean, life in a maximum security prison, and inside of 7 years and 3 months, I'm walking out that gate on November 16th, 2015. And, you know, I had been working on that plan the whole time I was in there, you know, how would we go approach it and what I was going to do. And when I walked out of prison November 16th, 2015, and anybody that's ever been out of prison before, you'll know exactly what I'm about to describe, Mike, and I know you know this too. When you step outside that gate, did the ground feel a little different to you? Did the sky seem a little bluer and the trees a little bit greener? I mean, did you feel that too?
When I got out of prison, it was an amazing experience, and everything was extraordinary. I mean, I walked out on August the 12th, 2013 after 29,500 days in prison. But like you, I used my time inside to prepare well. And so I could certainly appreciate the blue skies, the even the air smelled better in society. Yes. So yeah, it was just an awesome experience, and I'm very grateful to have had a good reentry. But it was all because of the decisions that I made while I was inside, just as what I'm hearing from you.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. So, one of the things in my plan, I had all kinds of different stuff planned when I got out. The first thing I did when I got out the first meal, let's get to that, Whataburger. I don't know if they have Whataburger out in California where you are, but they've got them out here in Texas. And I had been dreaming about a Whataburger the whole time I was in prison. So my parents take me to Whataburger. And then on the way home from prison, they take me to my first recovery meeting because that was the most important thing for me to get into. My program of recovery got me where I was because, it taught me, the unselfish, honest, pure, and loving part. It taught me about the things I control and serving others and being humble. And I had to stay plugged into that. I had to go find a sponsor. And that was the first thing I did. The first night I was out of prison, I'm in a recovery meeting, and I go and I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps. And then the second day I was out of prison, I went to Provost Humphrey Law Firm, and where I met with Mr. Humphrey. Remember I told you about writing Mr. Humphrey with my writ of habeas corpus? And
I do.
him telling me to come back and see him whenever I got out of prison one day. And so I set up a meeting with Mr. Humphrey. My mom set it up while I was still in prison. And I walked in there, and I think they wanted to see what I looked like. Damon was in prison for almost a decade in a maximum security prison. What does he look like? And they were shocked because you can't look at me and speak to me and tell that I've been inside the institution from what people's stereotypical ideas are of an inmate. And Mr. Humphrey gave me a job right there on the spot. And I told him, I told the lawyer I work for now, Chris Kirchmer, I told him, I said, man, you give me a chance. Give me a chance. I will take out your trash. I will fetch your coffee. I will do whatever you want me to do. Give me a chance in this new life. Give me a second chance. And they did, Mike. They gave me a job. I walked right out of prison and into a law firm that is one of the most distinguished in the state of Texas. I mean, it's a 1 in a million type deal. 1 in a million. And then the next day, Wednesday, I got out. I had to go report to parole, but before I did that, I went and met with the chief of police in the town where I live, in Port Neches, Texas, Chief Lemoyne. And I made an appointment to go see him, and he sat across from me. He goes, well, Mr. West, what can I do for you today? And I laid it out for him. I said, Chief Lemoyne, I just walked out of a maximum security prison in the state of Texas. I got a 65-year sentence for organized crime. I was a serial burglar. I made a lot of mistakes. I hurt a lot of people. But I live in your city now, and I want you to know you're not going to have any problems from me, and that I want to be a productive member of society, but I wanted to meet you, and I wanted you to meet me to let you understand this. And, Mike, when I was in that last 6 months of prison, I told all these guys I was in there about my plan because one of the things in that treatment center, you share what your plan is, your first week, your first month, that kind of thing. And everybody laughed at me, Mike. Everybody told me that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, going and talking to the police. I mean, are you crazy? Are you serious? And I tried to explain to those guys, man, when you get out and you're a productive member of society and you're doing the right thing, those police officers, they work for you, man, and you've got to work with them to some degree. You can't have this adversarial relationship with the law enforcement wherever you live. And so I wanted them to know. And he was a little suspicious of it, to be honest with you. He said, I've been doing law enforcement for almost 40 years, and I've never had anybody walk in here out of prison freely into a police station and tell me that they're living in my town. He said, so I'm going to be watching to see how you do. And he said, but I respect what you did. Mike, one of the things that I made it a point to do that last 6 months, because it was the treatment center I went to, the prison, there was a behavior modification program. Everybody there made parole. And so everybody there is for 180 days, and everybody's got an expiration date. We're like cartons of milk. We're going to expire. You know exactly the day you're leaving prison. And all you got to do, what a lot of guys do in there, is they call it fake it till you make it. But I thought to myself, why would you fake it till you make it? You got this tremendous opportunity to learn something else from another program the state of Texas is offering. But I went even further. I went around asking every guy I could in that 6 month program, especially the guys, especially the ones that had been there 4, 5, 6 times to prison. And they keep going back to eggs. I asked those guys, hey, what are you going to do this time when you get out of prison? And I didn't tell them why I was asking, but I made a note of everything on these guys' list. And these lists were the same list all over the place. It was, hey, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go find a woman. I'm going to go find my buddies. I'm going to go get high. I'm going to go do this. It was all I. It was all about stuff they wanted. It was all stuff in self. It was gross, Mike. But what they gave me is a list of the things that I would not be doing when I got out of prison. Because remember, I told you, rarely is it ever a good idea to learn from your own mistakes when there's so many examples of others of what not to do. And these guys gave me a huge list of what not to do. And what not to do was within self. And so, when I got out, man, my list, like, we're going to the police department, going to parole, going and finding a church, getting involved, telling the priest at my church, my Catholic church, St. Elizabeth in Port Neches, hey, man, put me in the game. Find a place for me to belong. Get me involved. I want to volunteer in the church wherever I can. Because I was going to have a lot of free time on my hands, Mike, and I'm an addict. I know that boredom is a trigger for me. I know that boredom can be a very bad thing. So I did. I got involved and I talk to guys all the time that are fresh out of prison. Parole lets me speak to these guys on Thursday mornings. So a fresh group of guys that get out of, men and women that get out of prison, I get the first crack at them. Parole has given me that opportunity now because of all the things I've done. And I tell them all the same thing, man. You've got to find ways to do service work. You want something different in this life. You want people to take you serious and give you a chance. You're going to have to give back. We're going to have to not be takers this time. And they always ask me inevitably, well, what kind of stuff can we do? We may not have a car. We may not have, opportunities, and people don't want us. We're inmates, and that's not true. One of the best things I got to do, my sponsor in AA got me doing this, is he said, listen, he said, go to a retirement home. Go to the front desk of that retirement home and ask them for a list of people that never get visits in that retirement home. He said, and it's an institutional setting. He said, you're going to feel a little weird going in there at first. He said, but they will give you a list of everybody that never gets visits. They don't care if you've been to prison. They don't care if you're on parole. They care that you're there to want to spend some time with their people that have not had visits. And Mike, you go and spend 20 minutes with someone that hadn't had a visitor in 5 years. You do 3 or 4 of those visitors in a day, and it makes you forget about what your problems were in life. And that's the whole idea. The secret to life is serving others and being humble. We've got to give back in life, Mike. Those of us that have gone and paid this ultimate price, that have made mistakes in life, we've got to find a way to give back to society and get involved in society again. And one of those ways was that plan that I had while I was in prison. And I found someone to sponsor me to take me into schools. It's a judge, a local judge in the area. And eventually I found this cop, this investigator. The judge was a guy named Judge Brad Burnett. And the cop was this guy named Marcelo Malfino. He's the assistant chief of detectives in the district attorney's office here in Jefferson County. And these two men took me into schools all over the place and let me spread my message of giving them the background of my story and all the things I did wrong and the mistakes that I made, and giving them a message of hope. And eventually the college football programs caught on, because I'm the only college athlete ever, the only NCAA athlete ever to get a life sentence to get out with a chance to tell the story. And, you one day you're figuring out how to balance your time, because not only do you work a full-time job, but you've got Clemson and Alabama and Georgia and Texas A&M and Texas and Pittsburgh and all these other schools calling you to come to their programs to speak to their football teams. And, I look at it now, Mike, and I've got the most amazing life ever, but it's because I put the principles of my recovery first. It's because I wake up every single day with that same prayer that I had when I was in prison that I learned in recovery. And it's a 2-part prayer, Mike, and I say it every day. God, put in front of me what you need me to do for you today, and let me recognize it when I see it. Do you remember that crazy prayer that I told you I had in county jail? Remember that crazy prayer was, God, get me out of this jam, and if you do, I'll go out there and be a normal guy again. I'll just smoke meth on the weekends.
I do remember that.
That's a selfish prayer. And moreover, I'm bargaining with God. It's not like God waits for me to wake up every morning thinking, man, I sure hope Damon gets up so we can run this universe together. So you've got to surrender to that. In recovery, the first step is, you're powerless over drugs or alcohol, and that your life had become unmanageable. There's that second part is what always got me. The guys in prison, we would go to these meetings, these recovery meetings, and then they would sit around talking about how their life is manageable. That, no, I'm doing all right. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you're wearing white. You got to walk inside this yellow line. You got to wait for an officer to tell you go to chow, go to the showers, go to the rec yard. You got to wait for someone to tell you to do pretty much everything in life. That's the height of unmanageability. And if I wanted to have a life that was manageable, I had to get out and do something different. And one of those things, Mike, was the first thing when I got out of prison was not to get shacked up with a woman. And look, man, I hadn't been with a woman for almost a decade, and I get it, man. It's a desire that's really strong. But the thing about it is this, Mike. I was in, just like you were in for a while, you were in a lot longer than I was. I was in for almost a decade in a maximum security prison, an artificial environment, because prison is the most artificial environment there is. These pods, these tanks, they all have their own personality, their own character. but they're all artificial environments. You know, you only make about 200 decisions a day when you're in prison. Everything else is made up for you. Out here in the real world, Mike, you know this, you make a couple of thousand decisions a day. I mean, decisions of what to wear, what to do, where to look, when you're driving a car. And so the thing about it is, I had to get to know myself again. So I committed myself to working the 12 steps in my recovery program with my sponsor when I got out before getting into any kind of a relationship. And I committed myself, moreover, to figuring out who Damon West was. Mike, when you got out of prison, how well did you know yourself? How well did you know yourself, what your favorite food was, where you wanted to go, where you wanted to travel, all the things you want to do? Because life is a fluid situation. It's always changing. And you just hit a major change. I mean, walking out of prison, you did 26 years, right?
That is correct.
I mean, it's mind-boggling when you think about it. You had to figure out how to pump gas. Gas pumps were different.
Actually, that's not accurate. You know, I came out ready to rock and roll, and that's what I teach in the program is the more you prepare yourself while you're inside, you can come out successfully. You came out and tell us that you were within days able to land a good job in a law firm. And I came out with that same level of plan. And that's one of the things I really try to show is if you prepare yourself well, you can completely disrupt the expectations of what it's going to be like. My goal was I would come back to society. I'd be able to put on a suit and tie, and not a single person would know that I served a day in prison unless I told them. And because I executed that plan, keeping everything I thought, everything I said, everything I felt, everything I did in harmony, just like you described and advised, my outcome was fundamentally different. And it's what we strive to teach people through Prison Professors is that you can absolutely change the outcome for yourselves, and you don't have to have that life of mediocrity and struggle that so many face when they come out of prison. At least that was the case for me. That's what I strive to teach. That's what I will be using your story to show other people as well, is that you've come back successfully. We want everybody coming out of the prison system to be back successfully.
You know, Mike, one of the things I want to add to that, too, no, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing. And when I talk about, you know, getting to know yourself again, that's giving you a chance to be able to have a normal functioning relationship with other people, because you have to know yourself. You cannot give what you do not have. And getting to know yourself starts while you're in prison. You've got to do all that stuff. But more importantly, when we get out of prison, we have to go out there and own what we've done. You know, like you said, you put on a suit, no one's going to know you've been there unless you tell them about it. But when you tell them about it, Mike, you have to own what you did, man. No one wants to hear about, well, I was innocent. And, you know, I remember being in prison, Mike, and I thought to myself, man, I must be the only guilty guy around, because all those people in the life, not all those people, but a lot of those people in the life sentence building, they were set up, they were framed, they were done wrong. And I get that there are innocent people in prison. I get that, but not 90% of them, you know? And so when we get out, one of the things that I think people expect from us is to take responsibility for what we've done. And when you make an apology, one of the things I learned is not to say, I'm sorry, but, you know, you say, I'm sorry, and move on. You know, you keep your side of the street clean. And keeping your side of the street clean keeping my side of the street clean has been the most effective tool with everything I do, Mike. Because once I've made my apology, or I've made my amends, or I've done what I'm supposed to do, I can move on and know that I did the right thing, Mike. And you can start each day that way.
You sure did. And we want to thank you so much, Damon, for sharing your inspiring story with our audience. We will be using your story to inspire people in state prisons, county jails, federal prisons, private prisons, any place we can reach people who are standing up for count. We want them to hear the inspiring message that Damon just offered, and we want them to know that even though they're living in struggle today, they can come back successfully just like you did. But it all begins with the choices you're making inside, with keeping everything you think, feel, say, and do in harmony. And as Damon told us, you got to bloom where you're planted. And if you're planted in prison, the time is now to begin preparing for a successful return to society, just like Damon said. Damon, we've come to the end of this episode. Do you have any final words of wisdom that you might offer to our audience?
Yeah, I can keep this real simple. I'm going to quote someone that helped me out a lot in life, Mr. Jackson, because Mr. Jackson I still think, Mike, he may have been an angel that was put in my life, but I give everybody the same advice that Mr. Jackson gave me, because it can help you in prison, out of prison, wherever you are, whatever situation, is to go out there and go be a coffee bean. That's my call to action to everybody that's listening to this story. Go out there and go be like that coffee bean. You change the atmosphere around you. You jump in that pot of boiling water. And you tell that boiling water, turn the heat up. Man, I got this. That's it. Go be that coffee bean.
That's awesome. Be the change that you want to see in the world. That's what we've seen in Damon's story. And if you didn't have an opportunity to listen to the entire thing, it's broadcast over 3 consecutive days. This was the 3rd and final episode. We had yesterday's episode where he spoke about doing 65-year prison term. The prior episode, we learned about his trajectory from being a high school and college athlete, quarterback in college, to aspiring stockbroker, to somebody who's struggling with substance abuse. We learned the entire story in 3 episodes. We hope that you will find value in it. I know that I did. And if you'd like to learn more, we encourage you to visit prisonprofessors.com or text the word Prison Pro to 44222. We will be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest. Thank you. And that was